Here we are.
All
We have a
right,
note taker.
looks like we are live. That is an AI note taker somebody might be using. um, so welcome everybody to Environmental Matters Committee meeting for January 9th. And for the record, all the members are present, Alderman Arnett and Alderwoman Finlayson. And let's see, approval. Is there a motion to approve the agenda or modify it?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the agenda, please say aye.
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 Aye. Are we modifying it, you said?
No,
No.
no, I was asking if there were
Uh,
any.
Okay, aye. I'll approve the agenda.
All right. And first up, business and miscellaneous with approval of the minutes from December 12th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. So for general discussion, is anybody from Rec and Parks here? All right, I'll take that as a no. So let's jump into ID 925, Resilience Authority, speaking on the Annapolis Maritime Resilience Initiative project. Mr. Cohey or Mr. Etkin, either one of you want to kick things off? Introduce yourselves and please state your address for the record.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Gabe Cohey. I'm the Director of Programs at the Resilience Authority of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. And my colleague, Rob Etkin, is with Council Fire. He's been one of the contractors on this, really working on the community engagement piece of this project. We also have GreenVest that's involved. They're working a lot on the mapping assessment and then the eventual partial designs that will come through this project. And I'm sorry, Alderman Savage, did you want my physical address or just my
Physical address, please.
physical address? Yeah, so I'm in the Arundel Center building.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. I mean your resident, your place of residence.
Oh, I'm actually
yes.
from Baltimore County. I live in
Okay.
Catonsville, so not a Anne Arundel County resident. Rob, are you? I think you're on the Eastern Shore, right?
That's correct, Queenstown.
Queenstown. So let me share just a quick slideshow, just to give a little bit of background. The Resilience Authority of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, we're in our second or third year of serving Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. This Annapolis Maritime Resilience Initiative kicked off in October, really. We got some funding through National Fish and Wildlife Foundation earlier in 2024, but it took a little while to get the contracts and get the team together. So we kicked off in October. And again, this is through the National Coastal Resilience Fund that came to us through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, NIFWA. Let me see. Sorry, clicking through here. All right. So what is AMRI? This is looking at nature-based resilience projects across Spa Creek and Back Creek watersheds in and around Eastport. We're looking for community scale projects that we can prioritize. So we're doing a lot of community outreach, really diverse community engagement. We met with the Eastport Civic Association in November. That was our first outreach event. We have a next outreach event on February 4th at Pitt Moyer that we're planning now. And we're really planning and executing with a priority on equity, right? So looking at Eastport, working with the community to understand where they're experiencing flooding events, where they are experiencing climate impacts. And then we're going to be working as a team to prioritize projects that will help mitigate those impacts. So the approach of the Annapolis Maritime Resilience Initiative is, again, really heavy on community engagement. So that's the piece that Rob and his team at Council Fire are helping us with, to make sure that we're doing really active outreach and then getting all the community members there to really give us input on where their vulnerability is. GreenVest is working with us on this larger scale vulnerability assessment and some mapping exercises. And we're looking for opportunities to reduce risk, right? We know that climate impacts are increasing. We know that Eastport at large is having a lot of experiences of flood issues and storm surge and sea level rise risk. So we want to look for opportunities to reduce those risks. At the end of this project, we're going to be looking for site prioritization. So we're going to prioritize sites that we think will have the greatest bang for the buck or the greatest impact for the investment and for the work that needs to be done. And then we are going to get to some conceptual designs, maybe about 10% designs, and then a master plan that will give us some funding strategies and implementation schedules so that we can really take that to new funding sources to the city and say, hey, let's look at this punch list. Let's look at these prioritized areas and try to put some of these projects into action. So our proposed timeline, this got, again, extended a little bit. I think the original grant was through June. We've requested to extend this through December just to give us a little bit more time as we're just getting underway. But January through March, so kind of Q1 of this year, we're going to be doing a lot of that public engagement. So like I said, at February 4th, we have a pit moyer. We're planning more community engagement and really getting out to some existing and standing community events and community meetings. And then roughly Q2, April through May, that's when we're going to be doing a lot of the assessment work with GreenVest and using what the community was telling us to then marry that with what we're seeing through models and through mapping exercises and looking for opportunities to reduce those risks. Then June through July is when we're really going to start to do that site selection, continue public engagement, start to talk to people about, hey, here's what we've heard from you. Here's what we're seeing through the models and what we're saying. So do some ground truthing with those folks and then select sites. In August, we'll be developing our designs and looking at funding strategies, looking at schedules. And this is really going to result in a master plan. So by December, really, we think we'll have the bulk of this done by September for the master plan. And then we can shop it around again with those community members to say, hey, is this meeting the mark? Is this what you guys had in mind? How can we edit this before we hit the December deadline on this grant? So the goal is to have that master plan, to have priorities list, and also have up to 10 concept designs so that we can really start to then go through other funding and budgeting exercises to make sure we can get those projects to come to fruition. So that's a really brief primer. I didn't want to take up too much of you guys' time, but that's what we have for you. And Rob and I are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Could you go back to the timeline slide?
Sure.
All right. Are there any questions from the committee?
Yes.
All right. I see Alderman Arnett.
Yes. So this all looks very good. Can we get a copy of these slides? We don't have it in our package. But I saw in the report from Sustainability and Resilience, or Resilience and Sustainability, that some of the ideas for Board 8 are a backflow valve, backflow preventer valve down on 2nd Street near the Maritime Museum. And it seems to me there was one other thing, but if I report on this to my constituents, I'm wondering if you could give us a broader idea of what some of the kinds of projects that could be developed under this program or set up when you're doing the master plan.
Gabe,
Yeah, so-
you want me to jump in a little bit? So Jasmine Wilding, City Department of Public Works. I just want to clarify that there is a separate city capital project looking at Eastport flood mitigation for the public right-of-way. So that would include street ends and the Maritime Museum property. And so I think those more structural types of solutions would be implemented under that project funding line, whereas the Resiliency Authority is more looking at, nature-based solutions, potentially on some public, but also on private property. Is that your understanding too, Gabe?
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jasmine. So Jasmine has been a part of our project team. Obviously, they have some FEMA money. Some of these outreach events we're doing in tandem, so that we're getting a lot of this information at once, and we're not, kind of overburdening some of the communities in engaging in these ways. But yeah, so Alderman Arnett, I think what we're going to be prioritizing are nature-based solutions. So looking at living shorelines and bioswales and different things that can help capture the water, treat water, but also reduce flooding in those areas. And I think some of those, we may obviously, when we're dealing with climate impacts, we've got to look at green and gray kind of infrastructure together and how they can work in conjunction. But yeah, some of those more like backflow channels and things like that may be better fit through Jasmine's funding and program. But again, a lot of that's yet to be seen as we start this conversation to really understand where the flooding's happening, which I think we all have a pretty good sense of, but also what are these risk reduction measures that we could start to take.
Okay, so I missed the critical word nature in nature base. Can you give us, I heard swale. What are some of the nature-based kinds of solutions that we're talking about here?
Yeah, so again, it's using natural materials and using the way we like to think about it is like harnessing nature. So some of the more engineered solutions, require a lot of maintenance, require a lot of upkeep, and really get less strong over time as they deteriorate. But when we think about nature-based solutions, we're thinking about those that can be kind of self-generative or regenerative. So looking at living shorelines using, rock, sand, and vegetative materials that can help reduce nutrients, sediment, things of that nature, but also help to control water, control velocity, hopefully reduce some of that flooding. It is going to be challenging because of where Eastport is, but if we can help direct flow and we can help, kind of treat water within, again, bioswales, shorelines, wetlands, constructed wetlands, things of that nature. But it's really using vegetation, using natural materials as opposed to more hard armoring shorelines, or using backflow channels and piping for the stormwater movement.
Yeah, and I would add that some of the more engineered solutions might be, stormwater network upgrades, pumps, similar to what you see at City Dock, buried, bulkhead, replacement or upgrades, elevated higher. Not that our FEMA funding, is against nature-based, but we started the application for the FEMA grant before the Resiliency Authority kind of came on board. So sort of in the middle of receiving the funding, and I sort of scoped it to let's focus on the public right-of-way, the storm drain infrastructure, things the city owns and will maintain.
Which is why it's critical that Jasmine and our group, like, we continue to work together, because I think a lot of these projects will be, they will work in conjunction with each other to better protect Eastport at large.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Finlayson, did you have a question?
I do. It's about the public engagement piece. What is it that you are looking for from the public engagement? I mean, are you looking for especially folks who live on the water? Are you looking for proposals on what they can be doing or what you can be doing on, all the way around Eastport, or exactly what is it that you're going to be looking for in the community? And I'd like to add Mount Zion as one of the sources of community engagement.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I may throw it over to Rob. He's working on a lot of this community engagement, but I can say, so the initial engagement that we've done was having a map of the entire kind of footprint area that we're looking at, and really having community members saying, hey, here's where I live. Here's where I see a lot of water during high storms. Here's where we see the water going. So we can better understand, modeling only gives us so much information, and people that are living there day after day can really see where stormwater moves, where they see kind of high inundation events and things of that nature. But Rob, can you speak a little bit to the community outreach approach? Because I know you guys put together that.
Sure,
engagement
sure,
plan.
yeah. So Greenvest is doing a technical analysis with sea level rise projections, and they'll know all of the technical data. But as Gabe said, that doesn't always answer the real impacts on the communities, whether there's a bus stop or whether there's something else that the community uses. So we're trying to learn all of that local information and get it on maps and get people engaged in the process. So we're hoping that not only will we get a list of prioritized projects that the communities agree on, but we're also hoping for continuing engagement over time with sea level rise. And there'll be some online tools available so that over the long term, people can continue to provide input into both emerging problems over time and solutions over time. Does that help?
Yes, it does. And that I was looking for exactly what you were looking for from the community. And the voice of the community is, what I was reaching out for. My second question is, the Maritime Museum, by example, has done some stormwater protective like grasses. The projects that have already begun, I assume will be on your map. So your proposal will be to either enhance or, improve or, build on what's already been taking place.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. So looking at opportunities, just like the kind of the Maritime Museum footprint has been working on some things there, how we can, use that and enhance that across the area to just have better protection and better risk reduction.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a few questions. So what are the exact geographic boundaries? Are you just looking at the Eastport Peninsula, or are you going across Back Creek or Spa Creek at all?
For this, it's just the peninsula, Rob. Is that correct?
No, the funding
Yeah, it's
actually
just-
applies to the District 6, 7, and 8. So it's all the way around Back Creek watershed over to the other side. And so
Yeah.
all of the above is in the funding footprint.
Oops.
Yeah, the FEMA city line, I was just going to look at the peninsula, but the Resiliency Authority effort was a little broader. Most
Yeah,
of our,
yeah,
storm drain networks in the main Eastport area.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, we're Ward 6, 7, and 8 for the AMI.
Okay. Yeah. So I thought, because I recall us allocating additional funds in the last budget. I think one-time use money that was going towards expanding the Resilience Authority's efforts. So we don't have too much vulnerable shoreline outside of, Ward 8 and 1 obviously are the worst, but there is some elsewhere. So another question, and I think, as we get more, we would like to have you back, because for me, I think it'll help me get my head around all this once I start to see some maps. I'd really like to see some of the opportunity areas, but also some of the vulnerable areas that your vulnerability assessment and engineering studies will indicate. I would be curious to see that. So along those lines, well, first of all, and it's good to hear about your focus on the natural natural resilience technology. I'm also wondering if you or the city are potentially looking at retreat for certain properties. I know that's something the county's already been playing around with. They have some funding to look at a few properties that have just flooding issues that would cost more than the property's worth to address. We've seen some of that also when we went to Netherlands, except on a very massive scale. Clearly not talking about that here. We don't want to abandon Eastport, but I am curious if you're looking at, there may be certain properties that are just, again, cost way too much for us to fortify or protect. So I'm just curious if you're take that into consideration?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. In case you guys haven't seen it, the Annapolis flood, I think it's called Flood Mitigation Plan, does a really good job of showing maps of all the vulnerable properties in the Eastport area and really the city. So there's a hazard mitigation plan as well, but the flood resiliency, flood mitigation plan really does a good job visualizing that if you hadn't read it. But I would say the Maritime Museum itself, that's definitely been on their radar. Is probably part of they have their own concept study that they received capital bond money to look at from the state, and then the city might take on the future design in more detail with a different FEMA grant than I've been talking about on this call so far. But I definitely think retreat is something, or relocation is something they've looked at just because of where they are. But and then the street ends, I think with the right designs and backflow and considerations, I think those are probably manageable risks that I think we can come up with some solutions that help protect better what we have and just utilize the space a little bit better.
Thank you. What about the Resilience Authority?
Retreat is not something that has come up in our conversations to date, but I think everything's on the table. And as we go through these processes, there's conversations that we'll have to have. But no, it's not. I will say most of what we have been thinking about and talking about are nature-based designs and ways to reduce risk on those areas. Obviously, if the city comes and says, hey, there's some property here that we don't think is worth investing in, and we want to maybe assume it, make it a park that might be inundated at times and be useful other times. Those are all things that are certainly worth considering.
Yeah, that's essentially what the Netherlands did on a much grander scale, but they have a large, I forget what they call the area of the country, but they use it for, they lease it out to farmers, but it's expected that it's going to periodically flood, and that's in order to protect the most populated areas. Again, not that that's directly relatable to this, but again, I know the county's been looking at that for individual properties.
Hey, Jasmine, can you speak to how many years out you guys are looking at this to protect the work that you're doing?
So we were awarded the FEMA grant in July. And so we have 7 years to spend the funding. So, we don't have as stringent of a deadline as the NIFWIF. But yeah, we're looking to get started. Since the Resiliency Authority is doing this work in the same area, my current strategy is to maybe leverage some of those existing partnerships and contracts and augment the tasks. And then the other main thing going on with the city budget line is we have a draft agreement with the Army Corps of Engineers to do a vulnerability model and assessment of our storm drain system. And my understanding is that is just waiting on the final signatures from their legal counsel. It's been sort of in that limbo for the last several months. So I'll keep following up, but my understanding is that's in their budget and it's in our budget. It was a 50-50 cost share. So I think if that were to take place, and then potentially an augmentation to the Green Vest contract under the Resiliency Authority to pick up where that leaves off and come up with some fleshed out solutions. And so, yes, this FEMA grant is just for design. And then, potentially the Resiliency Authority and the city could go joint on a implementation grant of some kind on the federal scale.
So the second part of my question is, to what year are we building solutions to protect to or to function until?
Yes, that we haven't really identified that yet in our analysis, but yeah, it's a good question. Do you have a recommended time horizon?
No, I've asked this question before to former directors of public works, and we had talked about initially years ago we were using 2050, but that's quickly approaching us. Other jurisdictions are building to 2080, and some as far as 2100, but 2080 seems to be the year that a lot of jurisdictions are considering, and so that's why I asked the question.
Well, I would encourage you to possibly, if you can, get a couple of different options. If I'm not sure if you're doing this in-house or have a consultant doing it, but they might be able to provide some options for the council to consider and see what we may want to fund or not as far as how far to go out.
Yeah, I do know. So for the FEMA grant stuff, you have to do a benefit cost analysis, to compare doing nothing versus, whatever you're proposing, and build into their model is the assumption. I think it's a 70-year project life. And then if you want to edit that in the model, you provide justification. But yeah, usually we think over here about like design storms and not necessarily in that sense. But I do know that 70-year thing is kind of built into the FEMA framework. But.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine. And for the Army Corps of Engineers, I think you said, did they? Is that for the entire storm drain system or just a certain subset?
That's just for the Eastport Peninsula.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I would like to, it's about a half hour into our meeting. We have a number of other things. I'd like to move on unless there are any other burning questions. All right.
Thank you, guys. Happy to come back.
Please do. Maybe even yes, definitely. Keep this in mind, and whenever you have something else to report. Thank you.
And everyone's welcome to come out on to Pip Moyer on February 4th from 6 to 8 p.m. Just to put that on your calendar if you're interested. We'd love to have you and get a better sense of the project.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. We have a flyer that's being developed, so we'll make sure you guys all get that.
All right. Thank you. All right. Now I think I saw Rec and Parks on here, so I'd like to go back to ID 1125. Is Director Johnson?
Yes, I'm here. I apologize for being late. Virtual was the key word on the meeting invite, and traffic was horrible. It still is, but I'm good now. I apologize.
No problem. So what kind of information do you have for us on Elktonia Cars Beach? What your plan is?
So thank you for the opportunity to clear up any misconceptions. I think there was some slight confusion around what we're doing and what has been done. We engaged the 2 consultants in October. And so when I say the 2 consultants, it's 2 different groups. There are 2 parallel processes going on. So there's the shoreline and coastal restoration, which is one process, and then the master plan or the long range plan that's being undertaken. So there was some confusion too about a master plan already being done. That was with the community. Blacks of the Chesapeake had somewhat of a draft plan that did not go through the city. We were not involved in it. And so that created some confusion. So in order to clarify that confusion with the community, particularly the 2 adjacent Chesapeake Harbor and Baywoods. Yes, Baywoods. Thank you. In order to clarify that, we promised that they would be in on the very beginning so they could just ask some general questions of the consultants. And we had that meeting. I think it's October, sometime in October. And so then when the consultants did their site visit, they may have been November, actually, the consultants did their site visit. And then the consultants went back and they did some site due diligence. And then we're scheduled to have community focus group meetings, input meetings starting this month. And so it will be towards the end of this, that we'll have those meetings. We're still scheduling it and confirming it. There was a discussion about whether we wanted to do meetings during the day or in the evenings, and we opted for the evening option because we figured, it's more convenient for many people, particularly with some of our students, because the students are going to be engaged as well. So we have several checkpoints throughout the process. So our staff check in will be after the site due diligence. So during and after the community meetings, which will be some. We'll be checking in community. I'm sorry, we'll also be checking in with the consultants, and we'll have a staff review sometime mid-May. And that's right before the draft master plan is complete. And it'll be draft. So that we'll have a check-in then. And then our plan is to have community input again and present to the community throughout the month of June. That was on purpose. And so that also coincides with our Juneteenth event, which happens at Cars Elktonia. And we figured a lot of the people who remember Cars Elktonia and being down there would like to give their input on our future plans as well. And then September, the master plan report will be complete, and we're hoping for adoption in October. And that's barring any schedule conflicts, any major issues or roadblocks throughout this whole entire process. So that's draft, which is why I'm not presenting it to you, because once I present it to you, I want to be sure of the dates and the times and the rest of the plan. And right now, we're just going back and forth a little bit. One of the pieces that we're going through to try to decide is how to engage council, whether or not we'll have a separate council meeting and working through kind of all the legalities of it. So that's a piece as well. I know there was some concern about us, kind of moving forward with the plan without even briefing council or the mayor's office, and that's not going to happen. We have nothing to brief you on yet because nothing has really been done yet. And then the other parallel process is the shoreline and coastal restoration, and that's more of a technical piece. And so that company is in the process of looking at the best way to do the shoreline and coastal restoration. They're going to come up with 2 options, and these will be internal options because of the technical nature of this. And so we'll go back and forth on the pros and the cons. We'll decide on one option, given the best scope and, all the considerations. And that will be what we're going to present to the community for feedback and input. And when I say community, I'm talking about the larger community, all of the interested parties. And from that point, when we agree on a shoreline and coastal restoration plan, it will be about 4 months for the permits to get approved. And then upon the completion of the permits being approved, then and received, then we will go forward with the construction. And that I'm told is, not a very lengthy process. So I think by October, we should have hopefully everything kind of wrapped up with our master plan, how we're going to move forward with Cars Elktonia, and the shoreline and coastal restoration should be wrapped up. We will have to work around the timing for Juneteenth because, of course, we don't want the site to be under construction during Juneteenth. So we are hoping that we won't start that construction until after Juneteenth, which, based on our timeline, we think we'll hit it pretty close as long as the permits go through as quickly as possible.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Director. Are there questions from the
Sure.
committee? All right, I see Alderwoman Finlayson first.
Yeah, my hand must not be working. I'm pressing the button and it's not going up. Anyway, thank you, Ms. Johnson, for that. What is happening in the interim? We just had a major storm that probably didn't have a significant impact on the water's edge. But are we doing anything to shore it up until the actual work begins in, did you say October?
No, so the work won't begin in October. Right now, we're thinking that the permits will be, that we'll have a complete design by February. And this is, kind of fast tracking it, maybe March, but then it'll take 4 months to get the permits. So April, May, June, July. So we're looking at July. So construction would not start until July. And then we're looking at hopefully being complete in October. So in the meantime, we're not doing anything with the shore. We don't touch the shore. as far as coastal resilience or restoration is concerned. We will do the land part of it. And for the land part, our parks team will go in and, kind of weed whack and, kind of hold the weeds and the overgrowth back, and make sure that the site is presentable, but that's the extent of it. We won't do any major anything. We'll wait for the shoreline and coastal restoration.
So where in the plan does the educational center fit? I mean, the
So the
building,
educational, Mhm.
the building that's there is what I'm referring to.
Okay, so the building that's there will not be the educational center. That building is going to be torn down. That building is not going to be reusable at all, and we'll spend more money trying to retrofit it than to just build a new. And because we promised everyone that we're starting with a clean slate, we don't know that's where the education center is going to be. It might be the education center is out on the water. We've talked to, if you ask me, and in my silo, and Rosalind, if you could wave a magic wand, where would you have the education center? I would say out on the water. We've talked to critical area, and we can have up to 10,000 feet out on the water. If you've ever been to the Cambridge Hyatt, they have that gazebo-like structure out on the water. So something similar to that, because that would also give the public, one, access to the water, two, a pier that they could fish or crab or what have you off of. And so that would be public access again. But we're not there yet. We need plenty of community input. We need experts to kind of look at the site and say where we could do it. We do know that, so there are two parcels. There's the 5-acre parcel and there's the 0.8 acre parcel that the house is currently on. The 5-acre parcel has a covenant or a restriction where we can't have more than 2% impervious surface. The 0.8 acre parcel does not have those same constraints, but it is along the shoreline, so we will have critical area restraints, but it won't be that 2% impervious surface. So we're going to have to get creative, which is one of the reasons why we pulled together, in my opinion, the best team in the country to be able to do this. So we are excited about that. Now, the master plan won't build anything. The master plan will say, okay, based on our conversations with all involved interested parties and community, council, elected officials, and even visitors, they will say, here is a concept of where we think the educational center should go. And then at that point, we'll have to do a design and construction of it. And we're not funded for that yet. I just want to remind everyone. But this will tell us kind of how to better address the actual parcel. It will also discuss some parking, our best options for parking, and it'll be a roadmap for how we should move forward.
Well, thank you for clearing up the part about the educational building there. I just heard you say, however, that that's not funded, the educational facility, which means that's going to be a capital project for us in the future.
Yes.
Do you have an interest in getting a proposal into the budget for 26?
So I would say probably not, only because we don't know what it's going to look like. It would be a placeholder. We could certainly do it if that's the will of the council to put it in, but we don't have enough information yet. It could be on the water, it could be on the land. When we're looking at our constraints as far as pervious versus impervious, we have a lot of considerations to look at. We'd have to look too if we're looking at having net zero, if we'd like for it to be platinum LEED certified. There are a lot of considerations for the facility, and I don't think we have those answers yet. And I think there's some grants, quite honestly, and some other funding opportunities that we could go after. So perhaps maybe a capital project for design at least is an option. And I'm sorry.
I would hope that we do something to get it at least started in the budget. We will have a totally new council in a year. And
Sure.
I know pretty much, I think I know the commitment to this project today, but I don't know where it will be a year from now. And so I
Okay.
would hate for it to be lost because, administrations change. So, anything, I would hope that there would be some interest in at least doing the first step, the planning step, to get that on the city's books as a proposed project.
Okay, then I
Thank
retract
you.
my answer earlier and I'll say we're going to carpe diem, we're going to seize the day. And yes, we will be submitting something into the capital budget.
Good. I totally agree.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Are you finished, Alderwoman?
I am. Thank you.
Okay. Alderman Arnett?
Well, I just wanted to say I agree. First of all, I think if there's something very quick that develops, we could be considering one-time only money. But I think getting in the CIP, memorializing it, even if we don't have firm figures, there's a lot of things in the CIP that don't have firm figures. So let's get this memorialized or in the hopper.
Yes, sir. Say less. We got it. We will do it.
All right. Well, thank you, Director. And what I'll say is great to hear this information and keep us informed, especially when you get some of these public meetings scheduled. I would like to hold a town hall for my ward with you sometime, maybe this spring or whenever else you think it might make the most sense with your time. So just keep me posted, and I'm happy to do that to keep everybody informed. But it sounds like we're on a good track with this project.
Absolutely. And we will, once we confirm the engagement meetings and the schedule, we'll send that out. Happy to come back once the dates are firmed up and say, oh, here are the dates. We're doing this on this, and this date. Right now, it looks like we're looking at January 30th through February 1st. I think if that's February 1st, which is a Saturday. So we have Thursday, Friday, Saturday set up, including the evenings, and then Saturday will be some daytime meetings. But once we have firm dates to send out, we'll certainly be sending that to everyone involved.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you for taking the time today to join us.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation.
All right, next up we have ID 1225, which is the easement discussion with the Office of Law. Presuming Mr. Braithwaite, that's why you are here.
Believe it or not. No, I was not aware.
Oh, you're
give
not
me
here
one
for that.
second.
Okay.
The
Is there someone else from the
processed
law
by
office?
Ashley.
Okay.
And give me one second to see what particular easement are we talking about.
Well, if could you find out if Miss Leonard is still planning on joining us? If so, we can certainly just put her down further on the agenda.
All right, brief indulgence. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we could probably move on to
We do have a
031.
report
Sorry.
from Dylan that goes over all of these different easements.
Yeah, but I want to make sure we have the appropriate law office personnel here before we do that. So we also have. Well, we could jump into the resilience offices. Jackie, would you like to give a presentation on your office work projects?
Sure. Yes, I can do that. And I apologize for being late. I was in a discussion with the mayor about the electric ferry, which I can start with. So we are wrapping up this week our final interviews from vendors on the electric ferry, and we will be developing a short list for final and best proposals. And we should hopefully be under contract by early February with a builder, a design and builder for the electric ferry. Meanwhile, we're working on plans for the landing sites, Department of Public Works is still working out for the Fifth Street landing, if the bulkhead does need to be removed, how they would do that. Some elevations with the roads and the sidewalks that would need to be changed, and drainage. So the Fifth Street landing site is the most problematic. That site already floods regularly. So that's an issue that would have to be addressed along with this, as part of the landing site project. So it's a little bit more complicated than just a regular site. On the other side, on the city dock side, there are no improvements to make. The city dock is ready to receive passengers there from a ferry. All the designs we were looking at have a ramp type of extension from the vessel to the dock. So there's nothing we have to build onto city dock. Except that if we put charging infrastructure up there. So we have a budget for charging infrastructure, which we're not working on yet, because once we get the ferry selected, we will know exactly what specifications we need for charging. And at that point, that will be addressed. And then the third phase of that, so we have ferry design and construction. We have the landings going on site, that design and is next. And then we will have to start talking about a third-party operator, and we'll be putting together an RFP for competitive bids on a third-party operator. Just to note that the grant for the electric ferry covered the design build of up to 2 ferries, funds for landing site improvements, and funding for infrastructure improvements, such as charging infrastructure. It does not cover operations and maintenance. So we're envisioning a third-party operator. So we would have an expense associated with the contract with that operator to be determined. Harbor Master's office is working on an estimate of expenses so that we can include that in the FY26 budget. So I'm noting that so you can expect to see that in the 26 budget, probably coming from under Department of Transportation, because this would become one of our transportation options. I'm working on all of this right now with the city manager, assistant city manager, and with the finance department about where things fall, et cetera. But I'm trying to get them information as quickly as possible. The other item that would be in the FY26 budget that's not covered by the grant would be maintenance. So we're, again, based a lot of information we're getting is based on some of the interviews we're conducting right now with design builders. Is what kind of maintenance is required for the electric vessel. So that would be an additional cost we will have to put in the FY26 budget. And both of these costs, operations and maintenance, would be ongoing costs for continuing into further years. We had a lot of interest in the ferry. Yes, Alderman Arnett.
So at one point in this discussion about the ferry, there was the notion that we would have the ferries built, but that we might turn this over to a private vendor to operate them. When you're talking about maintenance, are you talking about maintenance of the landing sites? Or are you talking about maintenance of the ferry itself?
Maintenance of the vessel itself. So they do require very little maintenance, but these vessels are in early stages of being used throughout the U.S. But to date, the builders have found that they're very reliable. They have, much fewer parts than a regular boat engine would have, fewer, that sort of thing to maintain as far as the operating systems. Battery, we'll have to look at battery care, etc. The vessel hull itself, if there's damage to the hull or to any of the interior components or other electrical components, we need to set aside money for, that sort of thing. So we have a fund for it set aside. So as I said, the Harbor Master's office is looking at trying to do an estimate for us so we have something to put into the FY26 budget. And yes, that's what I was just discussing, was a third-party operator for the vessel.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on the ferry? Okay. So we do have invitations for proposals out on the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. They are due imminently. Monday, I believe, is our due date for us to consider them. We have a budget of $50,000 for this project. I noted in the Resilience and Sustainability Highlights document that the one big difference between the update that was done in 2008 was that we have not only we'll be looking at updating the facility emissions, which are the city facilities, and the community emissions, but this time we're also going to be producing a greenhouse gas reduction plan. There was no greenhouse gas reduction plan before, so this will be the first one that the city does. And that is, so there's 3 parts to it: communities, facilities update, community update, facilities update, and then the actual greenhouse gas reduction plan for the city. There you go. You have the memo that I provided to you that Dylan and the Chesapeake Conservation Corps provided on all the conservation easements. And you know, they did a great job delving into these easement issues that have plagued the Conservancy Board for quite a while, about, you know, some easements that weren't showing up on our website, others where we thought we had an easement but no survey to go with it, discrepancy on the boundaries, meets and bounds, other legalities to be concerned with. So never really had a budget to address this. In the, many years ago, the Office of Law had thought about hiring another attorney or a contract attorney to, you know, and to do this work for us, to help us update all of our easements so that we can eliminate any technical or legal issues with them. But we ran into an issue when a group was looking to do some invasives removal on properties and weren't sure if they were on a city conservation easement or not, because there wasn't backup in our documents sometimes to support that, although we thought we could give permission for someone to be there and we weren't sure. So a Conservation Corps intern was working with this group that was doing the invasives removal, worked with the environmental programs coordinator to look into all of the conservation easements the city either holds or manages, and did this comprehensive evaluation, and has identified the issues where we have some, I mean, it just identified the properties that still have outstanding issues. And we provided this memorandum summarizing their work to the Office of Law right at the end of the year. And I have spoken to the city attorney about this memo, and it's, you know, we've kind of left it with the city attorney to decide how they wish to address these issues and what sort of funding they might need to address these issues, so that we can have all the question marks removed from our conservation easements and make sure we know which ones are actually ours and how large they are, and who's supposed to be managing them. So I know this is, there's a lot of information in this document, and Mr. Lyles or someone else from the Office of Law may be coming later to speak to you about this.
Yeah, Mr. Lyles has joined us.
Okay, good.
Did you want to discuss that now, or is Ms. Leonard joining us for that? Or...
I can discuss.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, we've had an issue generally with real property matters in the city, and what I asked my team to do was to put a meeting together where we could put our heads together to kind of think about how we want to proceed, because I envision this is just really a part of a larger discussion of how the city handles real estate matters. And we need to probably get direction about whether we are doing an approach that carves out just these easements, or whether it'll be dealt with in the development and organization of this real estate group under the new Office of Central Services. And so in my view, I wanted to kind of figure out with a meeting of all the principals what direction you want to take, because in my view, if we just slice this piece out and end up doing a whole real estate office with real estate responsibilities, you know, we might be missing pieces of it, as one group's doing one thing and we're doing another thing. So we haven't had that meeting yet, but it's one that we need to set up, and we haven't organized it yet. But I'd like to see that done in pretty short order, and hopefully have some kind of resulting plan of action going forward that we could present to the council. And if I were to estimate doing this, because of the amount of work that we're doing in the office, we need a whole nother body. But I'm not so sure if another part of the city government is going to be doing it. and then we could help. So that's really kind of the plan. We just need to figure out what we're doing and whether or not it makes sense to do it just as Office of Law, or whether this new entity, which will be set up, will need our help, and then we have more hands doing it. So.
Yeah, well, that was essentially going to be one of my questions, is because I know this is a long-standing issue. It predates this law office. It goes back a ways, because we have some older development projects that have gone in probably 30 years ago, like the Gardens of Annapolis, that according to, I've always heard from residents, but I think Ms. Skyle confirmed it with Dylan's work, but that it looks like the easement was never properly recorded, and I've heard that happening in other instances. So yeah, I get that that may be a plan and zoning thing to work out with assistance from law office or central services, but it sounds like that's kind of a matter for, I think, city manager's office to figure out. But we just want to make sure it doesn't get lost, in the future. Because and that is, as far as resources, that is ultimately, I think, what the committee is going to need to know about. And is this in-house? Is this a contractor? Et cetera, et cetera. So are there any other questions about this from the committee? I see Alderman Arnett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank all those that put together this document. I was particularly impressed with the second and, I guess it's the second and third page, where we have a lot of ambiguity. So, and I was surprised to see that Severn House in my ward has an easement. But I think that this is a really good start, just identifying the areas where there's confusion. There may be some more easements coming along. I know we've talked about potential easement on Jeremy's Way so that we could address that failing bulkhead there. And I'm working with Nautilus Point. They're talking about making their shoreline part of the WME, but it all may also have some sort of an easement attached to it. So this is a very, very helpful document. I'm glad the work was done.
Absolutely. Alderwoman Finlayson, I see your hand this time.
Yes, thank you. I got it to work this time. It was a very useful document, so thank you for that, Ms. Guild. I recently wrote a letter to DNR in support. Well, first of all, I learned that one of the largest conservation easements is in my ward, attached to Kingsport.
Right.
And it is the community of Kingsport that has been maintaining the shoreline and have applied for a grant from DNR to assist with the funding. And this is not the first grant they've received. I recall many years ago when we learned about grants being applied for and received, and we didn't know anything about it. And we ended up having to maintain those properties once the grant funding went away. So I guess my question is, do we know what our responsibilities are with the easements, particularly when they are making application for funding independent of the city?
Now that's an excellent question, because we know based on the conservation easement terms what our responsibilities are, or the parties managing the conservation easement, what their responsibilities are. But we have not asked them to update us on whether they have applied for grant funding. And I think that's I'm going to take that as an excellent suggestion, that we do that. We have the Conservancy Board. We could make that one of their mandates, to be checking in as part of their check-in with our conservation easement holders to see if they've applied for work funding or are doing any major improvements. Most of our conservation easements allow for certain kinds of work to be done on the easement properties to maintain them in their current condition, such as trimming trees, removing invasives, that sort of thing. But you're right, some of them are on the water, not many of them, but this one in particular is. And those can sometimes be more extensive in the type of work they do. The types of improvements they do, we have to watch those too. And sometimes we have to ask the Office of Law to weigh in to see if what they're doing is appropriate under the terms of the conservation easement. Because some easement holders, especially when they have waterfront, they're like, well, wouldn't this be a great place to put, a dock or a kayak put in? And the terms of the easement may not allow that. So I think that's an excellent suggestion to make sure we're weighing in on them with the types of improvements they're doing as well as grant funding. Thank you for that suggestion. Oh,
I know that the residents of Kingsport have been very diligent, and I know they've been working with Mr. Adams, and I'm not sure which, I guess, Public Works Department, because they're working on a bulkhead. But they named in their grant proposal, I think it was 2 city staff persons who are working with them.
Okay.
Or from whom they received advice. Let me just put it
And you're
that
talking
way.
about the Crab Cove easement. Crab Cove?
It's not Crab Cove, I don't think. It's on the other side of the Kingsport community.
Because they've
where their kayak pier is.
Okay, yeah,
where
I
their
know
kayak pier. Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Lyles, for hopping on. Appreciate it. And
Miss Alderman Savage, we do have Michael Rosberg here, the Stormwater Program Manager, and he could speak to both the update on the stormwater rate and as well as Hawkins Cove.
Okay. Yeah.
Which are part of my update anyway, but he could update you much better.
Okay. I would like to just keep this as brief as we can because we do have 2 pieces of legislation we have to get through. Okay. So, Mr. Rosberg, are you?
Yeah, I'm here. I was mainly on just to listen in on the Naples Maritime program and the Cars Beach, but and I know there's been discussions. I think we've talked about. I can give a more detailed report on the stormwater, the FY24 annual report for the stormwater fee for the next agenda. But any questions you have, I can be here to answer without interrupting.
Okay. Yeah, I think saving most of that discussion for the next meeting would be good because then we'll have time to review the report. But I don't know if you saw, I did send you an email just to, I think it'd be good to get Mr. Adams' input at some point since the fee includes the tree canopy program.
Yep, I ran into Brian today and we talked, and I'll get him to get some input and make sure that any updates and any work that he's been doing is included in the report also.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And also an update on the credit program.
Yep, I will.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we can in talks with Stantec, our consultant who's helping us with our rate study. We can make sure that they're there to begin discussions and update on what the structure is currently and if moving forward what this committee would like to see or any just keep that discussion going and what next steps would have to be to get that done.
Okay. Thank you. And to the committee, are there any other questions that you would like Mr. Rosberg to address at the next meeting? Alderman Arnett, did you have your hand up?
Well, I did have my hand up, but there was a couple more questions about this, as usual, very thorough report from Resilience and Sustainability.
Okay. Well, Michael Rosberg is still here. Mike, could you just give them a quick update on Hawkins Cove?
Yeah, sure. Hawkins Cove restoration project. It's still in design. We are still working on, it's lots of phases with this project. There's trail aspect. There's obviously the living shoreline component for the restoration of the shoreline, as well as the water access component with a pier extension and improving the water access. It's likely going to be phased implementation, because we have, based on the funding available and just the amount of time, the lead time, a lot of the waterway permits is extensive. So we're going to have to, phase the implementation. So it's just still in design. But if if there's more specific questions or an exhibit, or a concept I could provide you guys for the next meeting, or if you want to look at more, just let me know and I'm happy to provide it to you guys.
All right, thank you. Any other highlights, Ms. Schild?
No, just that we've touched on a bunch of things with our guests, which I wanted to address, but just to update you that the plastic bag ban goes into effect January 22nd. Mr. Lakonich has done a good job about getting extra bags that we can distribute at various different churches, on our buses, and at food distribution centers in advance of the January 22nd effective date. And then the gas-powered leaf blower ban is in effect. Sorry?
When Ellen did the reusable bags years ago, she had city advertising on the bag. It was basically Annapolis, the city that does something. I forget what. Are these bags do they have any logo or information?
Yeah, they do. There's a sustainability, City of Annapolis sustainability brand on them.
Okay, thank
and
you.
Mr. Lakonich can bring one to the next meeting, show you, give you one.
I see Alderwoman Finlayson.
When will we have access to them? I'd like to pick up some to distribute to some of the local churches.
I believe that Mr. Lakonich, you can pipe in, has some now, and I'm sure he would welcome the help.
And there is in the report, they're going to St. Luke's, they're going to Eastport United Methodist, they're going to First Baptist. So there already are plans to go to some of the churches.
Right.
I noticed my church wasn't on the list, though.
Oh, okay. All right. We'll make sure we get. So the plan was to distribute them within 2 weeks before the ban goes into effect. We don't want to give them out too early, so people stash them away in a closet and forget about them. So the bulk of them will be distributed at least 2 weeks in advance. 1 week in advance. 1 week in advance, I believe. And then we have another shipment arriving, so we'll have a second phase of bags we'll be able to distribute. And we've put into the FY26 budget a request for some additional bags. Not as many as this year, which is the first year of the ban, but we plan to distribute more bags, mostly to support our low to moderate income population.
Alderwoman, what's the name of your church?
Mount Zion United Methodist.
Can we add that to the
I know
list?
it
On
is.
Second
Okay.
Street, not to be confused with the one on Bay Ridge.
Oh, thank you for that. Okay, 2nd Street. Got it. Okay. And then the gas powered leaf blower ban is in effect now. We are, per the resolution that was passed by council, we are not issuing citations until April 1st. We are educating, and we are still working with the Resilience Authority on a voucher plan. Their board asked for their council to affirm whether a voucher plan would be something that fits within the mandate of the work of the Resilience Authority before they could give us the green light to proceed with the Resilience Authority running a voucher program for the city. That is something that I should hear back from any day now from the Resilience Authority. If they do not approve the Resilience Authority to do the work on the voucher program, then city staff will pick that up and get that underway as planned by March. Okay, so I'll turn it back over to you.
All right.
Page 3.
Thank Alderman Arnett.
On page 3 of your report, you're talking about the LED conversions. I was shocked. $1,550 for the tobacco leaf. I mean, that's pretty big price tag per fixture.
Yeah, the tobacco leaf has always been really problematic. I don't know, I can't really speak to the why on that, why it's so much. But I have been in meetings with historic preservation and BG&E, 2 hours just on the tobacco leaf.
Yeah. Okay. It does seem like an eye-popping amount of money.
Yeah.
And I saw that electric fire truck was brought to Eastport Fire Station.
Yes, Pierce, which is the manufacturer of the fire trucks that the fire station or fleet procurement manager usually goes through Pierce to buy them. They have been one of the major manufacturers of electric fire trucks, and they brought one to the fire station. So the fleet manager and all the maintenance crew, the fire and the our firefighters were able to look at it, and they made a presentation. Pierce made a presentation, and a fire chief was very interested in procuring one. There is a program, a grant program through MTA for fire trucks, but they will only fund up to 75% of the difference in the cost of procuring one. And then I have that in this report. So we're still evaluating whether that's something we will pursue. If we did decide to apply for this grant, we would have to get our grant application in by January 31st.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with the Maryland League of Conservation Voters today, and they did point out that some of the money that's available for electric purchases, and that includes electric school buses, it's if it's not used soon, it may get gobbled up this session because of the budget issues that they're facing.
Right.
So
yeah.
if we're thinking about anything, we should probably get our foot in the door here.
Right. Yeah. And it's not, I've been told that it's probably not a good year for transportation initiatives. So probably the General Assembly will probably be cutting back on them, and probably not funding a lot of climate adaptation initiatives because of the huge budget deficit.
Speaking of which, did we ever get that lobbyist we allocated money for?
That was going to be my question
Oh, okay.
to Ms. Buckland. Is she still on? I mean, the session started yesterday, so we should have someone in place.
I believe we did, but I can ask her while you guys are doing the legislation part.
Yeah,
Oh,
no, I'm lurking in the background. I actually am not entirely sure of that answer. I will have to find out.
All right, thank you. Make a note of that. So that concludes your report, Ms. Cald?
Yes. The only other thing I mentioned is on our climate change litigation, and you guys have asked me about this from time to time. City is still going through, we're just starting really the discovery process. There's been the defendants, the oil and gas companies, have been reluctant to show us a lot of their corporate documents. So there's negotiations going on about what is actually privileged and not privileged regarding corporate documents. So that has to be ironed out before the discovery can proceed further. And the city has an amended complaint that the defendants have moved to dismiss, and we have an answer that we'll be filing to that motion to dismiss. As you know, the city of Baltimore had their case dismissed, but they are appealing. There are two very similar cases in Hawaii. The city of Honolulu had filed against the oil and gas industry that are the defendants have petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court to hear. And the U.S. Supreme Court is meeting today and on January 17th on their calendar. So we may have a decision today in the next few days whether they will hear those two cases or not. If they do not, then all of the cases, such as Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, will continue. If they do hear those cases, there could be a stay on our proceedings. We'll have to see. But things are chugging along, yet very slowly, as we can expect. One other wrinkle I just wanted to bring up with regard to all the climate deception cases is that President-elect Trump had said during his campaign and continues to say that he will pursue immunity from these types of cases against the oil and gas industry once he is inaugurated. And so we can expect opposition to these types of cases, influence to judges perhaps, and also any legislation that's been introduced. And there's been legislation introduced in the General Assembly, Maryland General Assembly, about funds set up for climate adaptation funded by the oil and gas industry. We expect opposition to those kinds of funds as well, that type of legislation.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for the news. All right. I'd like to move on to some legislation. We have O3124, which is mobile food service vendor signage. And I'm guessing that's why Ms. Minker is here. All right. Thank you for attending.
Thanks for
So
having
where we left off at the last meeting, from what I recall, is that I heard feedback from the committee, but also from our discussions with the director of planning and zoning, and so worked with Ms. Reuter on an amendment, and so that is the new amendment 1 that you see posted on Legistar. And I hope I caught what everybody's comments here. Happy to go over it if anybody has any questions. And then Ms. Maker, did you have a specific comment you wanted to make on any of this, or were you just here for our questions?
I'm just here if you have a question.
Okay.
I haven't really reviewed this with the director, but I don't know if during the last meeting, the number of signs has been addressed, if that was brought into consideration, that we limit the number of signs that they could put out, so that you don't have someone that has a large number of signage, or if that matters to the council.
No, I don't believe we addressed that. Ms. Roeder, do you remember if that came up in your conversation with Chris while drafting this?
No, the number of signs, I don't remember that being an issue. It was the tethering the signs to the truck was an issue that we dealt with.
Okay.
All right, I see a hand from Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yeah, I had a question, and I'm not sure we raised it the last time. On page 2 of the, I guess it's your legislative summary, on the strike through, little A1 requires that signage be attached to the vehicle. And my question is, does that mean that they cannot have signage attached to the vehicle in addition to the other signage that's being addressed here? I mean, is that the intent, to disallow signage that's attached?
No, we heard some feedback on that. Was the original language, but we heard some public feedback that might cause some problems with the food trucks, and so that was removed in the amendment.
So I just want to be clear. So the only signage they can have then is signs separate and apart from their trucks. They can't have a sign on the front of their vehicle or over the window, or, only signage that's not attached to them. Is that what I'm reading?
I'm reading through it here.
The legislation as it's currently written says that all signs related to the truck have to be attached to the truck. Some can be permanently on the truck. Other signs can be a distance from the truck. Doesn't say how they need to be attached. It could be tethered somehow. And when the truck is not in operation, it's not in business, the signs have to be removed, the ones that are not on the truck physically. The amendment eliminates that requirement that signs be attached to the truck.
The amendment eliminates the requirement that signs be attached to the truck?
Yeah.
Yes.
It would allow them to put up removable like sandwich boards, because we had a number of people say that they would like to be able to put those up. And so if you look at the amendment on page 2, it says removable signs that are temporarily placed around the vehicle should not be more than 25 feet from the vehicle. And that was with the intention, I think, to what Ms. Maker said, make sure they don't. I think Mr. Kubriak said he didn't want them set up far away from the vehicle and creating clutter.
And I understand, and I don't have a problem with that. I just don't want there to be a loophole that we're missing. You know, in the old language, it says signs that are attached can't be more than 18 inches. That has been removed from the language. So I just wanted to be clear of the intent. They can have signs on their vehicles. They can be at any size now. And when the business is not operating, they will have to turn their signs off if possible. But if it's painted on the side of the truck. So you understand the point I'm making, I think.
I think so. And so it does talk about removable signs. So those are the ones that can't be further than 25 feet. And they're the ones that need to be, they can't be blocking a sidewalk, obstructing a view of traffic. And those should be removed and stored when the truck's not in operation. But if they have ones that are actually attached to the truck, I think that's permittable as long as they comply with what's in B, and where B says that they can't have animated billboards, flashing signs, rotating signs, that kind of thing. So they'll still be able to have the name of the food truck on the side permanently.
Okay, and no limit to the size then, because we removed the 18-inch limit.
Yeah, the 18-inch was just a restriction on the distance, not necessarily the size of the sign.
Then that's not what I was referring to. Okay, I'm good with it.
Okay. I see Alderman Arnett's hand.
Yeah, I don't have a hand down on the bottom of my screen, so I can't put it up like Alderwoman Finlayson is able to do.
It's under react.
Under what?
React and a heart.
The heart.
Oh, I see. All right. So,
tap on it and you may get some options.
It looks like I'm clapping though.
But there's several others. Look deeper.
Raise hand. All right. So I'm clapping and raising my hand, lower hand. So I think though that Ms. Meeker brings up a good question. We don't say anything about the number of signs. It says they don't have to be on the truck. They can't be on the sidewalk. They can't be more than 25 feet. But they could have 20 or 30 signs. There's no limit. So is there any notion, maybe planning and zoning has an idea, is there a notion that there should be a limit to the number of signs surrounding the truck?
I just think that when we did the sidewalk signage, we limited those businesses to only be allowed to have one sidewalk sign. So I didn't know if you wanted to limit the number of signs that a food truck could have out off of the trucks. So the temporary signage that they're putting on the property or the hanging signs from their truck, if you wanted to limit the number of signs that, that they could have on at the entrance of wherever the trucks are for attention.
I mean, I'm open to it. It wasn't my original intention to address sign numbers, but I'm fine with that if the committee wants to add something to. But I know that the comments we heard, people sounded like they wanted to have a number of sandwich boards scattered about. But I think we could perhaps cap it at no more than 5 or 6, if that's what the committee thinks. 3, I'm seeing 3. Well, again, this has already been out. I don't know. Has this been out for public hearing yet?
It should have been. If we're considering it, should have been.
It has. So I don't know. I just don't want to have something have to go back out for public hearing again, but I suppose that's not really a huge deal.
It
I
was
guess
just a
I'm,
thought I had when I read it. I
Yeah.
have no, if you guys want it, and interpreting the code, because that's what I do as enforcement, so I just
Yeah.
like to read through and
That's a good question for sure. Well, I see one of the committee members say 3, or no more than 3 removable signs. Alderwoman Finlayson, do you have thoughts or preference on that?
Well, to be honest, I think 6 is too many.
Okay.
3 is fine. I don't know whether you want to think. I think about the food trucks in my ward, and they back up to a wooded area, so they have 3 sides where they could put signs. You know, maybe somebody's out in the open where they could put 4 signs, but I wouldn't think any more than that.
Okay.
3 sounds like a good number to me.
Okay.
if we get complaints, I mean, we'll try this out. And if they come back in and say we need more signs, at more than 3, it seems like the patrons are going to be falling over the signs. I mean, how do you get up to the truck?
Well, we can certainly, let's start with 3, and but I do think we should put it back out for public hearing, perhaps. Ms. Reuter, how would be the best place to put in a restriction, and I guess perhaps something an adjusted amendment number 1? Could we fit it in amendment number 1 somewhere?
Sure, I would do A4.
Okay. And just state there should be no more than 3 removable signs.
This under requirements, where are we putting?
On the amendment, second page, under A.
Under requirements, A?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, there would be the proposal is to have a number 4 there.
In little a, lowercase a, sorry.
So I'll make that motion if we're doing
Yeah,
it.
that seems reasonable.
Is there a second? Alderwoman, are you interested in seconding that motion?
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't hear him, but
Okay.
yes.
All right. All those any further discussion on that proposed amendment? All right. And Ms. Reuter, could we just make that a new amendment 1 from the committee? I think that'd be the easiest way to do it. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I see Ms.
Mr.
Jackson.
Chair,
We need to vote on the amendment as amended. Your amendment has to be.
So that's the next thing is.
I got you.
I was going to move we accept
amendment
the amendment
and ordinance. Because
okay.
Discussion.
Yeah, Alderwoman Finlayson.
In order to not send it back for a public hearing, because I thought that's what I heard you say, could we amend this on the floor?
Well, I don't mind sending it out for a public hearing. I think we probably should.
Okay.
If it's.
I can't imagine this is something that would have to go out for another public hearing. You think it would?
I don't think it necessarily has to, but I mean, I've received comments from 2 or 3. I think
now
truck owners.
We're responding to those well, it's up to the committee. I think I would be prepared to make a motion to accept the amendment with the Rules Committee amendment to the ordinance, and then I would further make a recommendation that we recommend approval of the ordinance as amended.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor of the amended amendment? Did I get that? Was that the motion, Ms. Jackson? Okay.
Yes.
Or would that have to be another amendment?
No, if you're amending the amendment, then you recommend it favorably as amended, and then you recommend the ordinance favorably as amended. That's it.
Okay.
So all those in favor of the amended amendment, which will be the committee's amendment number 1.
Aye.
Please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. And then is there a motion to recommend favorably as amended by the
So
committee?
moved. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those
Before,
opposed?
before we conclude this, do we have any notion, Ms. Meeker, about how many food trucks we have? I mean, I'm worrying about the enforcement load on this, and I don't think we have a staff report that talks about staffing impact, do we?
I believe that was included, but currently this is just me counting off of places I know where there's food trucks located. I want to say that the city only has about 10 food trucks that are in like permanent positions. And then we have a couple that come in for events. But other than that, I want to say it's about 10. So I don't really feel like it would be a huge increase to workload.
The staff report actually does address staffing. What it says is, generally speaking, the city isn't anticipating a large number of violations, so the work involved in issuing initial citations is expected to be minimal, around 20 to 40 hours per year. It's unknown at this time whether or not those citations will generate many appeals, which would require a larger commitment of time to prepare for and get through the appeals process.
All right, thank you. That does satisfy that. Who actually would be doing this inspection? Is there, I mean, it's not under electrical or plumbing. Are there inspectors that just will go by to and happen to see a food truck and make sure they're compliant?
Yes, that would be correct. We would, and it's possible that we could make part of the application process for them to submit to us, you know, the number of signs that they're going to have, and if they're removable, we could ask them to submit pictures of the food truck. And then that could be part of the permit application, but it would also be drive-bys and complaint driven.
Okay. I want to make sure we're not passing legislation that doesn't get enforced, because that's a constant complaint I'm receiving from my constituents. So,
all right. I see Alderwoman Finlayson's hand.
Yes, I think I may have raised this previously when this came before us, and I'm going to ask Ms. Buckland, how can we be assured that we get a staffing impact report attached, not within the staff report, but we're supposed to get, just like we get a fiscal impact, we're supposed to get a staffing impact statement also. So can we make sure that going forward with all legislation, we get that staffing impact?
So rather than having it as part of the staff report, have it as a separate document. I can.
That's what we. Yes, that's what we put into the code as a requirement when we did this, what, last year, 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I had simply been calling it out as a separate item within the staff report, but I can create a separate full document.
You understand, we look, when we see the legislation coming, we look for different things attached. We've already increased by adding the sponsors legislative report. But we need to make sure we have the staffing impact as a separate attachment, please.
And that I would just comment that may sound trivial or petty, but Alderwoman Finlayson and I have long agreed that we pass things without necessarily, in the past, without necessarily considering the impact on staff, either directly or when we're budgeting for staffing during the budget. So having that emphasis as a separate document, I think, is an important reminder to us as council members and a protector of the staff to the extent that we take that to heart.
Understood.
Thank you.
So thank you, Ms. Buckland, for lurking, and thank you, Ms. Maker, for joining us. So good to see you again.
Thank you.
And I think we're ready to move on to
See you, Lisa. It's been a while.
It has been nice to see you all.
You too.
I think we're ready
Ms.
to move
Minker, I'm sorry.
Move on to the last item on our agenda, which is R5424, FY 2025 changes in the position classification and pay plan. And we have 3 amendments to discuss. So first of all, do we have staff? Ms. Buckland, are you here to speak to this if we have questions?
Yes, and Ms. Hopkins should be joining pretty soon. But I will try to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, so are there any questions on the underlying resolution from the committee?
Are we talking about the amendments, or are we going just the resolution in general?
I'd say the resolution in general, then we could jump to the individual amendments.
Well, I do have a number of questions about the resolution in general.
Yeah.
There are some changes that are being made without the director's approval. And I use that specifically. One change at the town hall, I guess it was, where all staff were included, there was a description of the career ladder, which I'm totally in support of and have been always. But it's inconsistent. Some departments have 2 steps, some have 3 steps, others have 4 steps. So the question to me was, who gets to have 3 steps and who gets to have 4 steps? And why is it that we only get 2 steps in certain departments? So that's one concern that I have. And how do we rectify that? Are we going to be consistent, or can we justify why different departments are treated differently? The other question that was raised had to do with moving, I think it's on page 9. Well, one is the Finance Committee recommendation, but we can get to that later. But maybe it's not 9. Yes, it is. 24025, which is Emergency Management Planner 2, thus eliminating the Senior Emergency Management Planner. We have heard that we have 58 plans that department is supposed to update and monitor on an ongoing basis. The senior planner oversees the people who are updating those plans. And right now, I think they're down to, 4 people? So to take out that senior, there is nobody to supervise Planner 1 and Planner 2. And where's Planner 3?
I guess those 2 questions are somewhat related, so let me sort of answer both of them at once. So I know that Director Hopkins has gone back to the consultants for a fuller explanation of some of those differences in the number of steps that you see in some of the career ladders. Generally speaking, the pattern that is there is that the existing job classification was most appropriately was kind of paired with a journey level. And so what you see is that has been made the 2 of the ladder, and then there's one before it, one after it. If there's a senior, then the senior is the terminus of the ladder. There are a couple of exceptions to that pattern. And this is partly why we've gone back to make sure that we have their full logic documented for why those differences. In one of the cases, all of the job classifications and their grades are actually existing. It's one of the ones that has 4. But those grades are not contiguous to each other. That's actually how things are now. They just weren't arranged in a ladder. And so the only difference is that it's a ladder, but they actually didn't muck with the existing classifications. And the other place where the 2 other places that you see deviations from that pattern, we have one place where there's instead of a 1, 2, 3, 4, because there's an existing 1 and then a grade gap and then a senior. One of those is missing the 3. And then for the emergency planner, to your question, the existing 2 grades are actually right next to each other. What's missing is a 1, right? Because that would fit the pattern everywhere else. So we've asked them to make sure we have a documentation of their logic for that. In the case of the emergency planner in particular, I know that Tricia has put the consultants and Director Simmons back in touch with each other. We're aware of the particular concerns he has around incorporating the senior emergency planner within the series because of the particular oversight that role plays. So that's an active discussion that I know is going on. That is something we're aware of, that there's a desire for a different arrangement of those classifications.
Oops.
So how do you propose that it get addressed? I mean, if we're waiting to hear back from the consultants, how do we fix it?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of things that I think are likely to get rolled into a proposed amendment that would incorporate the results of those conversations. And as you note, time is of the essence. So that's not a conversation that can last for forever. So that's an amendment that I would hope we would get in reasonably quickly.
May I amplify on this point, please, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Alderman Arnett.
So I agree entirely with Alderwoman Finlayson, and actually maybe I want to be a little more strong. In my career field in the federal government, we started at a GS3 and went through GS15. There were some shuffles at the top when they brought in SES, but now they also have technical grades, so they still basically go up to 15 or 16. Part of that was a recruitment and retention sort of tool. If you got into a career field and you could see several steps out into your future, that was an incentive to stay and earn your way up the ladder. So having more steps rather than fewer, it seems to me, has that retention aspect to it. But I also agree the inconsistency. So I'm looking at Harbor Master, which is the same size as HR, and I'm not seeing career steps there at all. And then other places we'll see, like in Public Works, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, then 1, 2, and 3, and so on. But then when we get to HR, there's two different things where there's at least 3 steps. So the point that Alderwoman Finlayson is making is, why isn't that the same in OEM? It doesn't mean that it has to be filled, but it certainly does say that there is headroom to move up into that step should you meet the criteria to get promoted into that step. So I guess my inclination is to have more steps rather than fewer steps, unless there's some real reason not to do that.
Well,
I was going to raise this more when we got to rules than here. I wasn't really thinking about it in terms of environmental matters, but I'm also going to be raising the difference between deputy and assistant. I'm still not understanding the logic of that. And then I think that the amendments before environmental matters, the 3 have to do with the names of some of these categories as well as their classification levels.
yeah, I'm not sure how much we should get into the bigger questions here or not. I'm not sure if you want to save that for rules of government. I'm not sure, Alderman Finlayson, or we could dig into some of the amendments that we have here. Or do you think we need to get more information before we take action as a committee?
Well, why don't we talk
Well,
about
if, go
Sorry.
ahead, Alderman.
I was just going to say, why don't we talk about the 3 amendments that are before environmental matters, and then we can talk about whether that lends to going to a larger set of recommendations. But these are specific to this committee.
Yeah. All right. Are
One of
you?
them is
I
the
would
deputy
concur, but I
assistant.
did hear Ms. Buckland say that she was looking for additional amendments. So
Yep.
I don't think we can finish this if amendments are still forthcoming.
Are there, Ms. Buckland, are there amendments forthcoming?
There will be an amendment at the very least because there's one classification that I will take responsibility for, just a sheer transcription error on my part. It literally didn't make it onto the list. And so there will at least be an amendment. The question is, what else is on that amendment? There is at least that's in there, and highly likely that there are a few other things as well. So,
Okay. Well, the first amendment we have is from me, Amendment 1, and this is to add, let's see, to strike the current environmental program coordinator, and then insert environmental program manager 1, 2, and 3. This is being proposed to reflect the amendments we made to the budget, which were to create an additional position. And this just would have that reflected in this pay schedule.
I will make a motion to move favorably on this amendment.
I see a hand from Alderwoman Finlayson.
I have a concern because this position has not gone through proper channels. I think this sets a bad precedent that we are adding positions. I think we heard Ms. Hopkins say at our last meeting or at another meeting that the Civil Service Board had not reviewed this, nor had the consultants reviewed this. So this amendment seems to come directly from us. Now, if we're going to get into the habit of adding new positions, that's one thing, but I think this position needs to go back through the process that's been outlined.
Well, I don't
So I would not second.
I'm a little confused though, because this isn't a new position per se. It's one that we agreed upon 7 months ago now. Sorry, longer than that, right? With the budget. The budget created a new position, and my issue was all along that was not reflected in this legislation, R5424. I believe that R5424 should have reflected all of the positions we had funded in this past budget, and it did not. So this was, I see it more as a correction to be in line with what we already approved. As far as the Civil Service Board, I'd assume that when something gets approved in the budget, that it then goes through the proper channels. And again, it's been 6-7 months now. So I don't quite know what to say about that because it's already been voted on.
Well, I'm just basing my opinion on what Ms. Hopkins told us at the last meeting. She said this position, and correct me, Ms. Buckland, if I'm wrong, but I heard her say that this position, and I see there's a career ladder that's being proposed, but that's what I heard her say. Did I misunderstand what she said?
Okay, if I may, the position that is included in the career ladder includes the existing position that Mr. Lakonich is in right now, the environmental programs coordinator position, which we're proposing to change to environmental programs manager. Just the title change, but that the career ladder within that career ladder, his position would fall in there, and the position that was approved in the FY25 budget that we have not advertised. So that position, Alderwoman Finlayson, has not gone, that last one has not gone through the class and compensation study, the one that was approved in the FY25 budget. But Mr. Lakonich's position is also within this career ladder. So we would be creating a career ladder that allows us to include Mr. Lakonich's position, the new one that was approved in FY25, and then any additional ones. And we could then describe them as environmental program manager, environmental associate, anything else we choose to call them. But one of those positions, Mr. Lakonich's, is already an established position. The next one is one that was budgeted for, but has not gone through that process.
And what Tricia had talked about that you're referencing, Alderwoman Finlayson, is that this is one that we've asked for feedback on several different things from the consultants, this being one of them, that particular career ladder. And you are correct about that.
So yeah, so
go ahead. We are creating a new position, and potentially 2 new positions without going through the process. So it did not go through the career ladder. It did not go through the consultants, and they were working with us last year. So there was ample opportunity for them to weigh in on this.
That's not accurate. I mean, we followed the correct process. We got a budget amendment to create the positions. This amendment does not create a new position. We created them in the budget that was approved by all of us. And that what infuriates me is why this legislation does not reflect what we already voted upon 6-7 months ago. I mean, and why we haven't even
position not filled. That position has been filled, and it's in the budget.
No, it has not been. This
okay.
It doesn't. The whole issue is that the HR has not advertised this position. It hasn't advertised short-term rental position that we have actually created in this past budget, and has not been advertised for the past 6-7 months. That is unacceptable to me. We've agreed to create these. They should have been created. If we need to adjust their pay based on this new classification, so be it. But I don't understand why a director has the authority to sit on advertising something we've already approved as a council.
I want to clarify something. I think we're using one word in two different ways. What the consultants are looking at in this case is the creation of the classification, not the creation of, so the additional classifications that would be the career ladder, not the creation of a position from the perspective of, is that included in the budget, right? So the position, the creation of a position was approved within the budget. The question is, when you create that position, to what classification is it attached? And that is the part that those consultants are looking at. I hope that helps.
May I, Mr. Chair?
Alderman.
It does help. So we, in essence, already have someone in that position, and we've now paved the way for movement to the next level, to the environmental program manager 2. Am I correct in that? And then on to 3.
This, yeah, the thing that Trisha had talked about last time was making sure that that series, that ladder sort of fit the general paradigm. And to your question earlier, also making sure that we know that there's a consistent set of criteria that we're used to create those in all of those cases, whether it's this one or anything else. So I think there are multiple questions to be answered in that.
Well, but the legislation that passed, the amendment that passed in the budget did authorize an additional position, and that was through savings that we had from the forest program, I believe, if I recall correctly, from looping that into the watershed fund. So that was savings that we used to create a second position, right? And that's second position would be the level 1 here. The current position, I think, would be what, the level 2, or do I have that backwards? Be 2 and 3.
In what you see in the general pattern across most things is that the existing classification got assigned at a journey level, so that would be a 2 level.
Okay, but my point is the existing position was there, and we created one new position with the last budget. And at the time when that amendment passed, it was passed with the understanding that these grades would be worked out with HR, right? So again, I don't understand how we could go 7 months now, and by the time this actually gets approved, it could be 8-9 months. We're already on the doorsteps of the next budget. So what I don't understand is why these positions, since they're funded, created immediately after the budget passed and advertised, with the understanding that just like any other position in the city, they might get reclassified based on whatever we passed with R5424. Again, I don't understand why the HR director is sitting on this. The city manager told us at a meeting he was going to get this advertised, the short-term rental position advertised, and that was probably 3 months ago now, and it still hasn't happened.
I have sympathy for your frustration. I think that there is in terms of advertising the position, releasing it, that has to be attached to an approved job classification. Now, if we're willing to use an existing classification, then those can be done sooner. But I think part of the reluctance has been to use an existing classification. And therefore, that means that we end up waiting on having an amended classification list to draw from. So we met internally, and this got brought up in the rules committee as well. And I will reiterate what I said there, that I just on a personal level have been frustrated by how this year has gone. I know that the class and comp study has sort of, in some sense, thrown a little bit of a unique wrench into things, but the reality is there's always something going on. And the point of having a robust process is to be able to weather the various wrenches that enter our world. And so we did meet earlier this week to talk about how do we do this differently, because we cannot do this again.
But it's not going to happen for a long time.
No, not just class and comp, but just in general. When there are new positions that are created, like, it cannot take this long.
Yeah,
right?
well, let's see, Alderman Arnett, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. So I want to check on something, because I think you mentioned, Ms. Buckland, in passing, some time sensitivity. And so I'd like to get a little more clarification about what you were referring to there.
Time sensitivity.
In other words, well, I'll go on to my next question. I don't recall seeing the Civil Service Board findings. Do we have a report with their findings?
No, this is one of the things that got changed last year, is
Right.
that the Civil Service Board actually is not part of that process at this point.
That's what I thought. So then I want to go on to, and this has been a sore point for me for a long time. We have done this backwards. We have made the changes, put them into the budget, and now we're bringing them to the city council, the group that is supposedly the policymakers and controlling the purse strings. And I think a lot of this frustration we're feeling is because of that. We did not do the process correctly. To me, a robust process includes the council. And so now we're limping along in all the committees trying to catch up to these changes. And it is very hard to follow. It took me 3 minutes to find where 5206 was. So, we almost need to have two different lists, one that has them in numerical order, and then one of them has them in these logical orders. But I share your frustration. This is a very frustrating process, and we're playing after the fact catch up. This stuff is in the budget and is going forward in the next budget. And now we're just finally having an opportunity to give input. So, yeah, this is frustrating, but we knew it was going to be frustrating. I kept saying and saying and saying, this isn't the right way to do it. But in any event, we're here now. So again, the topic of discussion is amendment number 1 from Alderman Savage. And I can't tell whether Alderwoman Finlayson, you're comfortable now with what's going on or not. I mean, I have to admit, I'm confused. It seems like there's two things going on. One is creating a position for an existing employee, and then the other one is creating a career ladder for that employee. And I know we're talking about this with the employee on the line with us. I hope you don't mind, Dylan, but I think this is important to get sorted out. I don't know who's on first.
I can speak to the fact that I am not comfortable with this at all. I would prefer to hear from Ms. Buckland and Ms. Hopkins when they, bring some amendments back to address discomfort we have. But I am not in support of this amendment as written. You know, we have created departments and created staff in it. You know, Alderman, you mentioned your work in the federal government. Usually you have a problem and you find out what you need to address that problem, and then you find the manpower that will help you address that problem. I'm not seeing that. So I will not second it. I think the chair may have done that already, though. So,
Well, I'd like to try to get consensus when we can, but I don't understand, what do you need to make you more comfortable with, like, what about this amendment makes you uncomfortable?
first of all, you accused Ms. Hopkins of not getting on this after we passed the budget in June or July. Likewise, if this was of an issue to you, you could have addressed it sooner rather than now. Okay? I feel, as I've already stated, that we're creating a position and changing the pay scales without, even though it's a career ladder, without it going through the proper procedure. It did not go through the consultants who we hired to recommend this to us. Ms. Hopkins told us that, and maybe it was at Rules, maybe it wasn't here when she spoke to this, or Finance, I'm not sure where it was, but so I'm not comfortable with it.
Okay, well, I mean, your first point, as far as that I could have addressed this sooner rather than later, I did. I brought this up during the budget. I brought it back after the budget. You know, I've gotten plenty of emails I have with back and forth. I know Ms. Gild's been asking for this funded budgeted position to be filled for since the budget passed. And it's been one thing after another, as far as HR saying they can't do it, saying they didn't receive information, which she did send them. So just getting the runaround on that. So I don't know what else I could have done to get this moving. And I thought once we passed something in the budget that that's what we do. That's our responsibility. The purse strings. We funded it. We expect it to be implemented. And frankly, it hasn't been implemented. So as far as not following proper procedure, going through consultants, that also is not my or our responsibility. That, again, it was budgeted. Why it was not included into this consultant study right of way is beyond me. I don't understand. I don't think it's our job to be having to make sure that's done. It was budgeted. That is our primary responsibility. And we took the proper steps, and I don't understand why it hasn't been happening. But I know Ms. Giles been pushing it for a long time as well. And so that's why I'm frustrated. I mean, I agreed during the budget process, per Jody's request, to a friendly amendment on this amendment, which removed the grades, because originally I was proposing some grades. She had a friendly amendment, and I said, fine, that sounds good to me. I'll remove the grades. But they took that as an interpretation of removing the positions, apparently, and never told me about that until Vicky mentioned it, I believe, back in November sometime, or October sometime. So I have been trying my damnedest to follow the proper procedure. I don't know what else I'm trying to. I've noticed it wasn't included in this class comp study or an R 5424. I've been vocal all along trying to get that added to it. I have an amendment trying to add it to this R54. If that's not the proper process, please let me know what I should have done between the budget amendment passing and now to get these positions filled. I'm truly at a loss.
Well, Alderman, you know, you're correct. We are the policy makers, and we hire professional staff to advise us. I don't think any department director would prefer us to determine the grade of their employees, but that's what we're trying to do here. Okay, I don't think that's appropriate, but that's just me. I can vote.
This came
Okay.
from staff. These are recommendations from staff, not from me. I'm introducing the amendment to reflect a position that I had inserted into the budget. But again, I don't give a damn what the grades are. This is something from staff. I'm trying to get introduced because it's not in the, again, if I don't do this, what's the path forward? How do I get the positions that we already funded included into the pay schedule?
Well, I would think that you would work with Ms. Hopkins to figure out how to address it.
Okay, again, that's what I've been doing since gosh,
Well,
I could look back, but since early in the fall. So
Ms. Buckland is on the call, and I'm sure she would help to facilitate. Sorry, Ms. Buckland, putting, but
she's known since at least November 9th when I emailed you, and I have still had no resolution. Malonoff told me he was going to get resolved. Still no resolution. So please, if you have, enlighten me, Ms. Buckland. What should I do at this point?
I think at this point that my preference is to leave that ball in my court, because the last piece of that is sitting with HR, and I think it is in my court to make sure that that ball gets handled.
Okay, can you define the ball so we're all on the same page?
Yeah, which is making sure that all of the various recommendations that we've gotten, this one and others, have reached their conclusion of making sure that we have that final amendment that includes the one that I managed to leave out of that very long list, as well as a few other things. I had indicated earlier, there's some conversations with Chief Simmons and other things like that. Those need to coalesce into a final set of recommendations. And one of the things that's on that list of here's the last stuff we need to nail down is this. And I think that I would be very comfortable with saying that at this point, that ball is in my court to make sure that that comes to a resolution and that this doesn't linger any longer, because it has, to your point, and to frankly everyone's point here, it has already lingered too long.
So at this point, for not just the funded positions, but for these environmental positions, but also the short-term rental position, I know as well. When are they going to be filled? Are they not going to be advertised until this class of comp plan is passed?
The short-term rental one is a little bit different. So we did have a conversation about that one. I think that the conclusion is that there is an existing, we probably can use an existing classification. So Tricia is connecting with planning on and zoning on moving that one forward, rather than giving it a working title that's specific to short-term rentals. But to your point, moving that forward. The other piece with short-term rentals, as you know, was that there were some questions about how that did, or in this case, did not appear within the budget itself. So the other piece of that conversation actually was with finance. And at this point, we are still going to move forward. I know that part of the last conversation had been, do we need to close a loop that didn't get closed during the budget itself around that? And at this point, the answer to that is no. We may end up coming back to you guys later, but at this point, that's not going to hold up things moving forward. So We literally sat down earlier this week, went through the entire list,
Well,
and had
okay.
that conversation. So that one should be moving. That
Well-
one should not be waiting.
Well, there are two questions. What do we need to do to R5424 to reflect what has been budgeted? That's the first question.
There are a couple of classifications. This is that amendment that we need to finalize. There are a couple of classifications that I know, that the one that I missed, but I think that R54 includes, other than how do I say this? Other than how the conversations, like with Chief Simmons and stuff, turn out. Other than that, I think we have the information about that needed for R54. What I need to do is to circle back with Tricia to make sure we actually have everything, and that we have some last information about, for example, the amendment you have put forward, so that we can finally finish.
But is this, so what do you need? Is this amendment number one what is needed to get the environmental positions that we budgeted reflected in R5424, or should we be introducing something else?
So in some respects, that is a question, and Jackie and I have spoken about this a couple of different times. So one of the things that we end up having to do is to get clear about what all are we looking for, right? And I know that that's information that Ms. Guile has sent in, and that we need to make sure that has been properly accounted for. What you're hearing from me is struggling with not having as much information to present to you as I wish I did. And so what I would like to do is to go back and be able to come to you with a final, because the reality is
Final what?
a last amendment from us, and then last information to close loops like this one. Because like we have to move on this stuff, and
Okay.
the entire process took longer than certainly I anticipated, and I believe I am not alone in that. You know, you're certainly hearing from me a certain frustration about where we are, and I think a certain, probably safe to say, a certain embarrassment about that. And so, you know, I think it's safe to say that I am pretty motivated to get this finished.
All right. So what I'm hearing is basically we should not be talking about any amendments at this time.
Mr. Chair, I didn't hear that at all. I heard her say she will bring back the issues that we've raised. We have two other amendments. One is the Finance Committee amendment and one is your amendment. Now, if you choose not to discuss them, that's fine. But we do have two other amendments.
And so let's say, for the sake of argument, that what you say is, that at the very least, I want, you know, and this actually is reflected in the in Amendment 2. I don't like this title, right? We're not mucking with grades. We're not mucking with anything else. I don't like this title. I want it to be something else. That's your prerogative. I don't have to go back to anybody about that, right? Like, you have the ability to make those changes, and that doesn't.
I'm still not hearing a clear answer. Like, what do we need to do to R5424 to reflect what was budgeted as far as environmental positions that were approved in the budget? What do we need to do? I have introduced and requested this amendment number 1, which came from the city manager's office, but now I'm being told that I'm not getting clear support from the city manager's office. And I have one of my committee members saying I didn't follow process when this came from staff. So I'm trying to get a resolution to this environmental issue. What do we need to do to get this R5424 to reflect environmental positions that were budgeted in this last budget? In one sentence.
I need a final answer from Tricia.
Okay, and did I not notify you of this November 9th, 10 a.m.?
Alderman, I'm sorry. You know, you're questioning her like there is some judicial body here. She has answered our questions for us.
Has she answered the questions, really?
She has said she will bring back to us
and my
the
point,
information that we need.
Is that I've made this request earlier than November, and I'm still sitting here with this legislation before me, the amendment before me, without a clear answer. That is what's I find completely appalling and unacceptable, but I don't know what to do about it. I mean, this amendment's gone through the process. We've done everything we can. She said she was going to meet with staff earlier this week, I think it was, right, to discuss this and give me a final answer, even though it's already been 3 months. So we're sitting here still going around and around and around. I don't know.
Should I call the question? Is that what you want? I mean, because we have to move on this.
Let me recognize you. I'm Alderman Arnn. I feel abused. I haven't been ignored for so damn long.
Well,
Alderman Arnett, I see your hand up.
Thank you. So I have a couple of points. I'm getting confused, or I don't want us to get confused between the classification system and who we're hiring or not hiring. I would like to see us hire the short-term rental position. If that's being held up because of classification, then we have had on the books for years now 2 liquor license inspectors that we have never filled. And again, but that's a hiring thing, and we're talking about classification now. I would point out, I think we have at least two other kinds of classification things similar to this, one with OEM and one with the harbor master. And I'm interested in getting those things resolved. And, you know, I know everybody's frustrated, and part of it is because of the time things took and they ran into the budget and so forth. And I'm fine with that. I'm not castigating anybody, but I do want to move forward and get these things straightened out. And I think we're at the point now where the different council committees are legitimately putting in amendments to what they've been offered in R5424. And I think the committees ought to go forward and make their recommendations on those changes. And when we get back to rules, I think rules has a much heavier lift because we've got a lot bigger broad term questions. At the last meeting, I proposed part of a list that I made up just from questions we raised at the last Rules Committee. And I'm working on getting that to the chair of the Rules Committee and then on to the staff. But this committee has environmental matter concerns, and I'm not really sure what assistant city council assistant versus whatever has to do with environment, but it's been submitted, it's before us. And then we have the same thing with the deputy versus assistant in Amendment 3. I'm not sure, again, why these are environmental matter questions, but they are questions with the resolution R54, and I think we ought to go ahead and address them and dispatch them.
All right. Well, there's a motion on the floor. I'm going to second it because I feel like getting motion on the movement on this. So I'm going to second it. Motion for amendment number 1. All those in favor of a favorable recommendation for amendment 1, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion carries. Next, and
Amendment
as this,
number 2.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say amendment number 2.
I don't want to dwell on this, but I want to
I'll
just
second it.
ask that I would like to get a final answer from staff as far as what we need to do to get these positions filled.
I think that message has been sent forth.
The second amendment, which is from Alderman Huntley on behalf of the Finance Committee, is there a motion?
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
And I'll second it.
Alderman Finlayson, do you want to provide a description since you're on the Finance Committee?
I will, and this speaks to the city council assistant. The council created this position as a staff person for the 8 of us. And to change the title to legislative administrative assistant opens the door for other uses for our particular staff. And so I feel very strongly that we should continue to have a dedicated staff to the council. And thus it's amendment.
So the underlying resolution has it named, is the underlying resolution proposing to change the name or?
Yes, to legislative administrative assistant.
So your amendment will keep it as the existing name, city council assistant. Yes. Okay. Do we want to, all right, and that's been seconded. Is there a motion?
I moved it and
you moved it favorably. Okay. All those, any other discussion, I should say?
Well, I actually will warn everybody that I think actually the city council needs 2 assistants and an expansion of duties.
Don't say that now.
Triage our emails and those sorts of things. But the Alderwoman is correct. We did this to set up this position. I think it's worked very well. And I would note that every one of the city council assistants have helped us with legislation. They've just done it as a matter of course. Every one of them have been excellent. By the way, I ran into Takia on the street the other day. She's looking good and she looks very happy, but I still miss her. But anyway, we've had 4 now, and all of them I think are doing well as the city council assistant. And as part of that, they've been helping us with legislation and running our meetings, including right now. Dressed up in a big woolly coat, must be cold wherever Kaylin is.
I'm going to call the question.
All those in favor of amendment 2, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion for amendment 3?
I'll move amendment 3.
All right, I'll second it for sake of discussion. This is an amendment that would adjust some of the harbor master language. So I do think this is appropriate for the Environmental Matters Committee to discuss. And so again, as I wrote down here, this legislation would change the title of the deputy harbor master to assistant harbor master. And there were concerns sent to the council by Deputy City Manager Guild, who oversees that department. Well, I guess, Ms. Guild, do you want to explain the rationale for this? You're the one who brought it to the council's attention.
Yes, thank you. mentioned that the deputy city manager, which is the title right now, is the CNC consultant, was recommending that that position be renamed as assistant city manager. And the rationale is that they are trying to be consistent among departments. If you report to a director and you're the second, then you can be a deputy director. But if you do not report to a director, then you are an assistant. Since the harbor master is not a director anymore, that used to be a department, but it is not at the moment. It is the harbor master's office, and the harbor master is not a director. The CNC consultant was recommending that the deputy harbor master position be changed to assistant. However, in Ms. Hopkins' presentation, she made a comment that, you know, just to be consistent, you shouldn't be consistent for consistency's sake where it doesn't make sense. In this instance, I agree with her 100% because the deputy harbor master is very different from any other position, any second tier position in any of our departments. They act as a deputy very consistently. And in fact, they have to step into the harbor master or director's shoes almost every day because the harbor master only works 35 hours a week. And the deputy harbor master has to perform, be able to perform, and have the same knowledge about the function of the harbor master's office as the harbor master. So they're not stepping into the director's shoes like a deputy director does, only as needed. That is when the director is on extended leave or that position is vacant for some reason or they're on vacation. The deputy harbor master, their position, it's intentional and it's planned and it's very frequent. It's every week, several times a week, when the deputy harbor master steps into the harbor master's shoes. This is a level of responsibility that's not shared with any of the deputy directors. It's a very unique position. So if anyone is acting as a deputy director or a deputy harbor master in this case, it is the deputy harbor master. I see absolutely no reason to change this to assistant just for the sake of consistency. And there are other positions within the harbor master's office. The seasonal dock workers, we call those assistant harbor masters. So we would have dock workers called the assistant harbor master, and then the person who's second in command to the harbor master also called the assistant harbor master.
Thank you. Yeah, I see two hands. Not sure whose was first.
He was.
Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To me, the salient test between assistant, we have a lot of assistant city attorneys, and deputy is a person who is the alter ego for the director. And in this case, the assistant or deputy, as I would prefer, harbor master is the harbor master quite often during the weekly schedule. They are the person that is in charge of all the other staff. They're the person that is making the decisions about various safety factors or who goes on what mooring and what slip and so on. So to me, that alter ego aspect is a defining distinction. It's one, again, that I'm used to in the federal government parlance. And that's why I'm supporting this change. But I do have questions across the board, which I'll bring up at rules, about this whole deputy versus assistant. I think there's very clear ways to distinguish the two. And I think there are groups, as the deputy assistant, deputy city manager said, there are definitely distinguishable people who are assistants versus who are the alter ego for the operation.
All right, I see a hand by Alderwoman Finlayson.
Yes, thank you. I will oppose this. As I've said in the past, years ago, we decided that we would not have deputy positions. And in the departments where they are not recognized as departments, we have assistants. This is preferential treatment. And so I think we need to be consistent. The consultants didn't make this recommendation to us. and we should not go outside. We're going to use the consultant recommendations, but only when we like what they say or to whom they are applicable. And it also speaks to an increase in pay. Not that they don't deserve, everybody deserves an increase in pay as far as I'm concerned, but the fact is that this is tied to an increase in pay also. So I will not support this amendment.
Okay, well, I think part of the rationale is that if we feel like the consultants here did not do an adequate assessment on this when they compared jurisdictions that have harbor masters. It's very hard to find one that's exactly comparable to our harbor master, and so I thought it was a compelling argument for. I mean, I generally agree. I don't think we should step in unless it's warranted, and in this case, with the earlier amendment, when they clearly missed something that we had already budgeted, and in this case, when it's something they just did not do a good job in this particular instance, with this particular position.
I'd like to
Alderman, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I want to remind everybody that we were held very much at arm's length, we the council, when all of this class and comp was going on. And when we did have briefings on it, it was in closed sessions. This is now the opportunity for us as the policymakers and the budgeteers to comment on the results of the class and comp study. And R54 as well as R53 are the results of that class and comp study. So I do not feel compelled at all to be constrained by what they recommended. They may not have even taken this up. And so it is our turn to take this up. It is the city that we manage. We are the shepherds of the city. And I think we have every right and ability to make adjustments from what was recommended as opposed to what's enacted. And so that doesn't make me feel constrained at all.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to call the question.
All right. All those in favor of recommending Amendment 3, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
All right. Motion carries. Is there a motion to recommend action? No. Is there a motion to postpone action on R5424? Because I think there's still some potential changes coming.
So moved. Second.
All right. All those in favor of postponing, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. That concludes our agenda. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
I would, this is not for the good of the order of environmental matters, but a question to the chair of the Rules Committee and to the deputy city manager. If there is some time sensitivity, it may well be that we might want to have a Rules Committee meeting sooner than first Friday in February. But I guess that's really a question to you, Ms. Buckland. Are we, are we at a time sensitive point where we need to get all the committee actions happening sooner rather than later?
I would, just for myself, I would not want this to linger into February. And maybe this is a case where Alderman Finlayson and I should have a conversation about timing and figure out when we can do that.
I would be amenable to that. And we had said that we were going to get together, Alderman Arnett and you and I anyway. So maybe let's try to do that early next week.
Okay, I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Well, if rules is still going to get into those level of details, I don't entirely think that there's a reason for this. Should we just take action on this as a committee?
As opposed to postpone?
Yeah.
I guess I'm uncomfortable. I don't like having what are clearly strong points of view difference between myself and any other alderperson. So I would really like to have a little more time to have a discussion with Alderwoman Finlayson, and I would recommend you do too, Mr. Chair. There's something that's not working, and when you have strong divergence of opinions, I think it's important to get that resolved rather than just charge ahead and say we're leaving somebody behind on two of the actions. That's just my personal feeling.
Thank you, Alderman. I'm going to make a motion that we adjourn. Not that I'm running away, but I have a 6 o'clock, so I'm sorry. I have a hard stop.
Second. All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you much,
Have a
everybody.
good evening.
All right.